Welcome to Emmy or Not to Emmy.
When is immersive media no longer a gimmick? But before we get started, we want to introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Erica Barraza. I'm an actor. I'm also a producer and director of immersive media content. I have directed 360 video documentaries in places all over the world, in refugee camps, in war-torn countries, and then also just some nice, gentle, uplifting, empowering documentaries as well. Doing a lot of work in the impact and the for good space.
I'm Jessica Cantor, and I'm a writer, director, producer, working both in traditional cinema, television, and immersive media. Over the last 5 years, I've made a couple dozen immersive pieces and was a filmmaker in the Oculus VR for Good program, and wrote a chapter in the Handbook of Research on Global Impacts and Roles of Immersive Media, where I discussed discovering a language of storytelling for immersive media.
And I'm Eve Weston. I have a background in television as a television comedy writer. I also am an award-winning journalist who's written articles about arts and culture and also about virtual reality. I am a writer, director, producer. I created the world's first 360 VR sitcom, The Biz Nest, which has won some awards, which is very exciting. And it's also mentioned in the book that Jessica referred to. There's an entire chapter devoted to a case study of the show. And in addition, I also wrote another chapter for that book that introduces a taxonomy for talking about point of view in virtual reality, which I have a feeling we'll touch on a little bit later on in this. And then in addition to that, I am a professor, author, and speaker. So author I touched on a little bit with those book chapters that I mentioned. I teach and have taught both television story analysis, television writing, and 360 and virtual reality filmmaking, and immersive storytelling. And I've spoken about virtual reality and immersive storytelling at Augmented World Expo, Stanford University, the Brown Institute of Media Innovation, the SIGGRAPH Computer Graphics Conference, and some other places. So yeah, I think we're really excited that you're here and excited to get this conversation going.
We have the full perspective on not just production, but on what it means to develop a narrative-based story for immersive from the actor, director, and writer's perspectives.
We are collectively the Look Club. It's always nice to have a group name for you and your friends. But more than that, more than having a way for you to identify the three of us with one phrase, we had a goal, right? The three of us as professionals in the immersive space had been talking about the industry and what was working and what was missing, and we landed on some common ground, and we created the Look Club to address those issues that we felt could be improved, or those things that were missing that could really take this industry to the next level. So the Look Club is essentially an entry point into immersive narrative, and that's true for somebody who is totally new to VR and 360, or to veterans who've been working in this for years and years and years and years and years. Is a comprehensive database of immersive narrative. So it's a searchable database. Think of it like an IMDb or a TV guide specifically for immersive, where you can find any immersive piece and then learn where and how to watch it. And the Look Club is also a review show. So think of it like Siskel and Ebert for VR with a Tina Fey sensibility. So we talk about these narrative experiences critically in a fun and accessible way, because not enough people are talking about the amazing work that's being done in immersive, and we're excited to get people talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're kind of hoping to we're building the little wood pyramid of conversation here with all of the different components between the database that we're collectively building out, and the review show as well. And the database is something that we're looking for everybody to share into as we start building out the community between, and just like this bridge between the experienced immersive media creators and all of our newbies, whether it's a new audience member, a new viewer inside of a headset, or someone just new to filmmaking and immersive in general who says, I really want to get into this new medium on the ground floor. Great. join the community, right? And because it's like, as Eve was saying, it is a great place to start to just discover what's already been created, how are other people engaging in this medium, and start to build out your taste of what you like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. We provide some guidance throughout the show, but hey, everyone's welcome to their own opinions. We're just happy that people are looking for it. And that's the kind of community we want to build, is one where everyone's curious and everyone's just kind of interested in what's been done and how can I put my creativity into the mix.
Exactly, and a community where people have opinions, right? It's not just, oh, that's cool, but it's like, oh, that's cool, and I know why, and I have an opinion about it, and I have something to say to it, and I can speak to that specifically, and know how to think about it. Jessica?
I just wanted to, say, like, we are reviewing work, and I think there's a really good parallel there to the idea of submitting to the Emmys and having work judged by your peers, and potentially not your peers, because not that many people are making immersive work in the world of Emmys.
But we want there to be.
We want there to be, but we're deciding, what should be put up and what should win an award. And so one of the ways we review the work for our show is utilizing the taxonomy that Eve lays out in her chapters. And so I think maybe, Eve, you can speak to kind of a little overview of that taxonomy, because I think that is going to come into play in how we are going to discuss, the criteria of the Emmys and how they work. So I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Yeah, well, so one of the things I realized actually as I was a college professor teaching 360 VR filmmaking, and I wanted to show existing 360 and VR works to my students and talk to them about what was working and not working, and I also wanted to talk to them about what their options were for creating 360 and VR content, and I realized there were no good words to explain that and describe what we were seeing. And I thought back to what we'd all learned about in, I don't know, elementary school, high school, from our English teachers about first person, second person, and third person point of view in books, right? If you're reading a book and there's a character saying, I'm going to the store, or Call Me Ishmael, which is maybe more famous than I'm going to the store book, you know that it's a first-person narrative, and you can tell someone that you read a first-person narrative and they know exactly what you're talking about. And with VR and immersive, I would try to tell someone about an experience and they had so many questions, like, okay, but are you in it? Are you a character? Can you change the story? Can you move around? Do people know you're there? Like, just the questions were endless. And so this taxonomy is a way to boil down all those questions to kind of like approximately five terms. You can clearly convey what kind of an experience it is. So without going into it too deep, there are 4 tiers, and within those tiers, there's sort of 3 choices in each, and overall, it ends up giving you a really clear picture of of what you're talking about when you're talking about an existing 360 or VR experience. And it also sort of serves as a menu of options. So if you're looking to create a 360 or VR experience and you want to know what's possible, this lays out all the possibilities and you can choose, which is sometimes easier than trying to pick something out of thin air and hope that it is a thing.
And it's really effective when we're looking at work and we're trying to understand a creative storyteller's intentions, and whether what they chose to do with those intentions were effective in their work or not. And so it gives us a way to kind of look at a library of work and start coming up with this common language that we're searching for. And I don't know, Erica, do you want to talk about how you used it in your most recent work?
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I mean, I the way I spent my summer in COVID was directing 3 pieces, actually with Nani de la Peña, and so we've been collaborating on, we wrote out a couple of different stories for our clients. We had to digitally direct one in Brazil because we weren't allowed into the country, traveled to Mexico and dealt with COVID restrictions there for film and production, and then had one in Michigan as well. And throughout the entire process was really looking at, okay, well, who is our audience? What kind of story request has the client made to begin with, and how do we honor all of that, right? Because coming back to even just the title of what we're here to talk about, like, when is this no longer a gimmick? I think one of the things that gets overlooked a lot, especially in the VR industry, is the spectacle of it all. How do we make it grandiose? How do we push the boundaries? How do we do something? How do we increase the the fidelity and the resolution and all of these wonderful things, which are great for advancing the technology? But the truth is, we're here for narrative. Us specifically through the Look Club is here for narrative, and there's a lot of folks who are choosing entertainment based on narrative story, and so for them, spectacle just doesn't even really faze them, right? Like there are some days where all I want to see is a nice indie flick, and some days I want to watch my Marvel movies, which are all CGI'd and amazing sounds and acoustics and everything. So I think by using the taxonomy, we were able to really narrow in on who is our audience, what is the experience that they're here for, what is the type of person, an audience member who's attracted to a strong narrative story, enjoys the gentle experience in VR of a 360 video, it gives that kind of full immersion into new communities, into new environments that don't feel too foreign, in the sense that they don't necessarily need a space, environment. And how do we honor that story? So we were able to just kind of break it down point by point with the taxonomy, take a look, is this first person, how interactive is it, how, what kind of interactions do we want them to have, and really we're able to use it to build out our storyboard, analyze who we're telling the story for, and the most important question of all is, why is it in VR? Because otherwise then we would just use the regular, beautiful 2D cinematic.
Yeah.
And that I think is the biggest question to answer is, why are we even in VR?
Yeah, and I actually reframed that question in my SIGGRAPH talk, because I think really what gets to the heart of what that question about is as the viewer, why am I there, right? Why is the viewer there? And that's like another way of that sort of puts that question in different words, but in words that are a little bit easier to address in a specific way that really helps take your piece to the next level. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we all really want to do, and why we're even talking about to Emmy or not to Emmy, because the goal is to take our individual work to the next level, and also to take the whole industry to the next level. And we want to get past it just being about spectacle. So, we have to be careful that we don't go after spectacle at the expense of story, because at the end of the day, there are very few people who walk away from an experience going, oh my God, there were so many pixels per inch. And there's so many, and
in fact, like, it backfires, right? Like, there's that HD, like 4K kind of perfect resolution movie, and everyone, like, it all of a sudden felt like you were watching, I don't know, the cinema-ness of it went away. And so if we're trying to make everything so perfect from a visual point of view, we're forgetting that there's more than just that in telling a story. And
and especially the big challenge of the uncanny valley is that the closer you get to it, the more that your brain starts to actually reject the images that it's seeing. So I think there's a lot to be said for just honoring a certain kind of style and letting narrative just drive once you've picked what that visual language will be.
I mean, one of the examples I love to give, I totally agree with you, Erica, and one of the examples I love to give is that, like, if you watch I Love Lucy today in black and white, you're still gonna laugh, and I think we don't care that it's not in color. We care about the characters, and we care about the story being told, and that's what moves us.
So I have a question for you both. Do you two think that there is enough immersive media that's ready to be submitted for awards to make it important that we have awards categories?
I feel like I have a couple of answers, Jess, but I'm going to start with, first of all, it's so hard to know because it's so much more challenging to find immersive content than it was to find TV in the 90s, to use an analogy, right? Like, we could just turn on the TV and go up or down in channels, and with immersive, stuff might be on different apps, on different headsets. Some of it's just at festivals, and it's not even in the headset. And that's part, you guys know, that's part of why we created the Look Club, because We wanted people to be able to find it. We wanted to be able to answer your question a little easier. Like, we want all creators represented in this space. Then we can really easily make the case for, yeah, look at all this content that should be represented in awards. And this brings me to my next point, Jess, which is why your question is so great, is it's not just about the amount of content, it's about the type of immersive content. And that's what's so fascinating and connects back to the taxonomy, is there are so many different kinds of content that fall under immersive. I mean, my VR sitcom was up for an award a couple of years ago at Augmented World Expo, and we were up against this amazing sculpture with an AR component. And like, it's so cool that we're all doing such fabulous work. And I think that sculpture with the AR is like so cool. How you judge it up against a sitcom, I don't know for the life of me. Like, they're so different, you know, and yet they're in the same category. And so this taxonomy helps us break down immersive into, it can include things like Kimmy versus the Reverend, the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt episode, you know, interactive episode that Netflix did that you can watch on your phone or your laptop, right? Like, that falls under immersive. That's currently in a category for best TV movie, right? Is that right, ladies?
Yeah. Which is not the interactive category at all, which I mean, we have to have a sidebar about that in a second after we finish our
we'll get into that conversation for sure.
Yeah, and then we have experiences that are immersive theater, right? That maybe only happen live in a VR headset. And then we have, 360, and some 360 that's interactive and some 360 that's not. And so that taxonomy helps us to create distinct categories, kind of the way that we have categories in television of like comedy and drama, or half hour and 1 hour, right? There are distinct differences in the mechanics of how we tell these stories and create these experiences. And, I think with awards, the goal is and should be to compare apples to apples. And I think that right now in immersive, sometimes we're comparing apples to oranges or apples to mangoes, or what's like the most exotic fruit, like apples to star fruit.
We're comparing apples to cucumbers.
Yeah,
perhaps apples to pomegranates, right?
Right.
Yeah. Here's what gets me excited, because the thing is, like, I've always been kind of like teeter-tottering on the idea of awards anyway. Because like, you wouldn't want to create something only in the pursuit of seeking an award and recognition, because that just feels cheap, and I think you lose a lot in the creative process if you're just chasing awards all the time. But it's interesting, Jess, that you noted, the interactive episode from Netflix, the Kimmy Schmidt, Kimmy versus the Reverend, is actually in the movie category as opposed to interactive. Which is fascinating, because now you get to see how by motivating and celebrating these new achievements in storytelling, we're expanding the mediums that we're already familiar with. And I think that's what it really comes down to, because interactive and immersive, it could have been lumped in with emerging technologies or new innovations in technologies. And the truth is, for as much attention as people give new launches of VR headsets, new tech software for volumetric capture and all of and digital production are all amazing technologies for creating entertainment and watching entertainment. But it's not that, right? That's not what we're celebrating here, and that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about this category specifically in terms of Emmy recognition. Is how do you evolve storytelling? And and this is the huge opportunity, I think, now that we're seeing it cross over.
What's so interesting is that just like a 2 years ago, Bandersnatch, using the similar technology, was recognized for innovation in storytelling in the interactive category. And so just a couple of years later, this interactive movie is now being seen as a film, but and I think it rightly works in that category in a way. Whereas I think some of the other projects in the interactive category actually don't measure up against each other. But I'm wondering if we want to show a little clip from the Look Club now about how we broke down Kimmy's taxonomy, so we can kind of see how, even though it fits in television and as a TV movie, it also fits pretty beautifully in the immersive interactive world as well.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
Well, We'll go ahead and throw to the clip.
Okay, let's take a look then.
Welcome to the Look Club, where we bring virtual reality into reality.
Today, we're discussing the unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Kimmy versus the Reverend.
Oh gosh, I don't know whether to be excited or nervous. I could be excited it's comedy, or nervous whether it's good comedy.
Well, hurry up and decide, or we won't have enough time to talk about it.
Oh, well, if we're already short on time, I do have a self-tape to do. Should I stay or should I go now? If I stay, there will be trouble. And if I go, it will be double.
What is it with you two? Oh, I get it. Kimmy versus the Reverend is an interactive television show where we get to choose what the character does. Okay, Erica, you're staying. Eve, you're excited.
Netflix's tech platform is really cool. They have something called the Branch Manager to help them map interactive stories.
I would not miss the opportunity to talk about this with you ladies. For anything. The first interactive series Netflix did was Black Mirror Bandersnatch.
Kimmy versus the Reverend is a nice contrast.
Bandersnatch was pretty dark.
Kimmy versus the Reverend is a comedy.
With Black Mirror, each episode was standalone.
And The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is serialized and takes place in a consistent world.
And yet, it's almost like Kimmy versus the Reverend is an epilogue, and that it takes place after the series ends.
And Daniel Radcliffe, who plays Kimmy's fiancé in the interactive episode, isn't even a regular in the series. Kimmy versus the Reverend is sort of its own self-contained addendum.
That is written by the same team as the regular series, with Tina Fey, Robert Carlock, Sam Means, and Meredith Scardino as the credited writers.
And it's directed by Claire Scanlon, who after directing The Office, directed a ton of hilarious single-camera comedies.
Carla Engelbrecht, Director of Product Innovation at Netflix, was also a key team member.
Which just leaves one person without whom the show wouldn't be possible.
Kimmy versus the Reverend is an embodied second-person narrative participant mortal experience.
Second person, that almost never happens, at least in VR. If you're watching at home and don't know what second person is, it's exactly what I'm doing right now, talking directly to you, the viewer.
Hi, you. As Eve put it in her talks at Augmented World Expo and Stanford University, second person is incredibly meta. Like, you know there's a medium.
That we're on TV and you're not.
Erica, even though this isn't technically an interactive show, they still have a choice.
They can turn off the show if you're a big person.
So, to avoid you turning us off, let's get to it.
Okay, ladies, are you ready? Let's turn on our headsets. Let's stop our headsets and appreciate that we don't have to mess up our hair.
And now for real.
Go to your devices. Open your Netflix and
Don't chill.
The clock is ticking.
I'm ordering an Uber. He'll arrive in 4,000 minutes.
That's so many minutes.
Okay, I don't think that was the right ending, but I don't know. I'm not a writer.
Still over!
Fine, we can walk.
great, welcome back. So you can see we're sitting in similar places, but dressed very differently in that clip.
Yeah, speaking of virtual production, we do this all from the comfort and confines of our home.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, Eve, off the top of your head, what would your taxonomy be for television, just in general, a TV show?
Oh gosh, that is such a great question. Well, when we're sitting at home, we're not in the show, and so it's definitely not a first person narrative experience, and we're not generally being talked to. That now there are some exceptions where characters will break the fourth wall, but let's assume for the most part that is not the case. So I would say that most of the time we're watching a third person, we're listening to a third person narrative story, And we also, for the most part, have a third-person visual point of view because, again, we're not inside the show. So that would cover narrative and visual points of view. And I would dare say that it's embodied because you are the same person. You're having that same third-person narrative and visual point of view as somebody who is outside of the story. And then let's see.
And then the experiential category doesn't really...
It doesn't really apply, right? I mean, that sort of goes back to why we invented it, because we needed to be able to talk about things that just don't exist in TV and film. But now when you start to put the viewer in the show, then they do exist. And so that is another thing that is so interesting about that Kimmy versus the Reverend, right? Is in a lot of ways it would have the potential. Now that one you actually, we talk about it in our episode, you should check it out. You actually kind of are sort of in it in an unusual and unexpected way, which is super fun. There's another, what's that other amazing interactive experience we were talking about, Timeline, they can find on Echo, right? That one you're not really in it, and so I would say that one comes a little bit being a little closer to TV in those first two categories, but then you do have this interactive ability, and so there start to be some kind of pieces that fall in between. They're a lot like TV, but they start to use that taxonomy for immersive because they have immersive or interactive elements.
I'm wondering if we should show just, to give a sense of what another Emmy-nominated 360 piece that we reviewed, how we broke down the taxonomy for that. So potentially, what do you think? Should we show Traveling While Black?
Oh, I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So go ahead and we'll show you another clip from Traveling While Black.
Welcome to the Look Club, where we bring virtual reality into reality.
Today we're discussing the 360 VR documentary, Traveling While Black.
Some of my best friends are travelers.
Well, your friends are lucky because not everybody can just travel whenever, wherever.
For that they need Shakira.
Even within the US, before Trump and coronavirus, there were travel restrictions for people of color.
That's why they wrote the Green Book.
A travel guide for Kermit the Frog.
It's a guidebook for African American road trippers.
I know, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but more than usual. You're avoiding taking this episode seriously?
Fine, I am a little anxious about reviewing this piece.
Because it's about race?
People are sensitive. And sensitive people write mean internet comments.
But if we don't review it, we're minimizing a narrative that needs to be shared.
The Green Book, the movie, was totally controversial, but it got people talking.
And when people are talking, progress happens.
#MeToo.
Weinstein was a rapist, not a racist.
Right, but he's an example of progress from a discussion.
And wouldn't it be awesome if all racists went to jail for 23 years?
Well, prison fantasies aside. Oh, nope, wait, struggling to put it aside? Okay, if we think it's scary to review Traveling While Black, imagine how scary it was to make it.
I really respect Felix and Paul's studios for taking on such a sensitive and important topic. As directors, they're known for being really thoughtful about their choices. And this may be the first piece they put their studio's name on that they didn't direct themselves.
Apparently, the story of Traveling While Black originated as a play, and then they developed it into a multimedia project, and then someone suggested VR.
Oh, that was in that Guardian article. Originally, they were going to make the VR experience as an animation and then scripted with actors.
Yeah.
And then they landed on a documentary. And largely because documentary had been the format that's been most experimented on in VR.
You made some VR docs, right, Erica?
In war-torn countries, talk about brave.
If Erica was brave enough to do that, and Felix and Paul brave enough to make this piece. All right then, let's do this.
We need to talk about this.
So, Traveling While Black is what the VR pros call a disembodied, first-person narrative, non-entity robot experience.
Disembodied? Please tell me nobody gets their head cut off.
No, it just means that there's voiceover And it's narrating a story, just not your story.
The voiceover is not the voice in your head.
And the non-entity part means that no one in the show knows you're there.
And the robot part means the filmmakers are in control of your movement.
Gotcha.
Are we ready to travel while black?
All right. Let's start our headsets. Open your apps. And enter VR.
Enter
Enter VR.
Every trip through America for a black person during those times was potentially fatal. The assumption is at some time it stopped. And that's not the case. It never stopped.
I am feared, really frightened for black men traveling while black.
So what'd you think?
And I think while we're talking about traveling while black, I wonder, Erica, if you want to talk about like telling documentary stories in kind of 360 world. And there's one up for an Emmy this year called The Messy Truth, which Brie Larson is in, and has some similar themes to Traveling While Black, which was nominated the year before, and Janixa Bravo's piece, Hard Time for Small Things. Hope I didn't butcher that title. But I know, and Erica, you're making some documentary work that's a little different, but I'm curious like how much you look at these works from the past when you go into your new work, and if you feel that these other creators are doing the same.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. I think because a lot of the early work, was very visually driven. Where can we put the cameras in a place that's kind of exotic, that's something that doesn't make people feel too nauseous, and it was really driven more by the mechanics of it. And yeah, they had some really powerful stories, especially with the documentary-driven stuff. And I find now that with Traveling While Black and with The Messy Truth as well, these are ones that are kind of meant to look more like a docudrama, where you're taking real life events and kind of readapting the story a bit to kind of better suit the medium and the narrative that's best told with this medium. And as Eve said, you can watch the full episode of our review of Traveling While Black to see whether or not we felt that they really captured that. I have to admit, I haven't been able to watch The Messy Truth yet, but I think one of the... Hold on, I have a fire engine behind me, so I'm going to hold. So ominous with all these fires. So I have not been able to see The Messy Truth yet, but I think what's really interesting and what got me really excited when we first started working on the Look Club and building out the database is that it kind of lets you build your taste, right? Each individual viewer as well as each creator can kind of get more like a catalog of, okay, what has been done in the past? What worked really well? What were some key moments, how you tie the narrative and the visuals together? And Notes on Blindness, I think we all felt did that really, really well. And then you can see how some narrative through lines, there are some, visual tropes and languages that are starting to be developed that if people are looking back and seeing, okay, what has a previous creator done before? And then you start to weave that into your new ideas and into storytelling with immersive. That's really how we grow it, right? And we've seen that through the golden age of cinema and filmmaking already, how everybody just builds that narrative language on top and how many times it gets referenced back in pop culture. And it just becomes like the shorthand of how we understand this stuff. And I think what's super helpful for a lot of newbies, both on the creator and on the audience side, is that everyone gets the headset and says, okay, well, call my friend because I don't know what should I watch, what's good, where and everything is so marketing driven. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but sometimes you just want your friend because you trust your friend's taste in movies. And if they haven't seen everything, or if they're not aware of what all is out there, then they've got a limited scope of what they think is good, and then they try and create and build off of that, and they find out years later, oh, someone tried that a few years ago. and it didn't really work, or we could have done it different, or oh shoot, we should have seen that, used it as a reference and build from there. I mean, I think that's just part of the collaborative process of being a creator, especially in entertainment.
Yeah,
I definitely see a lot, like in my own work, that when I'm creating traditional media, I have a library of content to go to when I'm trying to get a moment or a feeling. And in the VR world, it takes a lot of hunting to find work to reference, or there's a freedom that you can kind of create your own. But something I'm finding and I'm somewhat disappointed in is
Jess, I'm totally cutting you off, but I wanted to ask you, because I know you are so great about referencing films when you're doing your movie directing, and I was curious because you're one of the earliest known, that makes you sound like you're a cave person, but I mean you're one of the early directors who created acclaimed work, and there may not have been much before you. So I was just curious. I know I have an answer for this too, but were you able to watch much 360 or immersive when you were doing your early pieces, or did that change over time as you created some of your later 360 pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate that at the time right before I started creating work was working for Sundance Institute, and so at the film festival I was able to watch like Nani de la Peña's work and experience Birdly and see Rose Troche's film and start kind of making a point of view and opinion of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to tell stories in this space. And then there was also a freedom of like getting to just try stuff and nothing could be bad. And now I'm kind of getting frustrated seeing, Hollywood pair with some technicians, but not investigate how stories are told yet. And so, bringing it back to the Emmys, I'm feeling like I see a lot of names that I recognize that are applying to the Emmys, but I'm wishing that there could be a merging of these worlds of people like yourself, Eve, Erica, and myself, where I know, Eve, you're connected more to the Emmys based on your past TV writing, but for me, the idea of submitting just feels overwhelming, or that maybe I don't belong in that space. But then I go and see work of great filmmakers, and I feel like they're creating something that's very rudimentary in the VR storytelling, and it's a beautiful place to start, but I feel like just a little bit of investigation, they could have pushed the medium forward rather than keeping it in the same place.
Well, I think that's so true. And it really, it's kind of a key point that someone who is one of the most well-versed in directing for film or for television may not know the first place of where to start when it comes to immersive. And, I think as we were saying, when we started, there may not have been a lot to look at, and mine is the first 360 VR immersive sitcom. So there were no, there's nothing quite like that before, but what I did have was I had spent a lot of time on sitcom sets, but I'd also spent a lot of time going to immersive theater. And so I was able to pull from both of those worlds. And I think that's so key, to not try and map one of them over onto something where it doesn't quite fit, right? But kind of be able to see the strengths in each and pull unique elements and weave them together in a new way to really create for a new form. Because that's what we're talking about. And I think that's what Jessica, you were so great about pointing out, is that talent doesn't necessarily translate. It can, but it might not.
Well, but Eve, you're pointing to something really, really, that's just at the heart of entertainment in general. I mean, it's all a collaborative process, and the creative process is just pulled from the everyday fabrics of our lives. Everybody has a unique perspective, a unique experience, and that when you start to blend all the technologies, all of the experiences, the different narratives, the different creative thoughts that bubble up into our minds as we start working in collaboration with people that are not like ourselves, that's when you get the really innovative stuff. But if there's a way for people to kind of all come in with like a base understanding of, most people, before they ever make a movie or anything, like they've seen a movie before, or at the very least a handful of movies, maybe even a couple of classics. But with VR, you've got a lot of people who are coming in saying, all right, let's do this. I'm going to lend my celebrity to this thing, or I'm going to experiment for the first time. And who knows how many pieces they've actually been able to watch. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I guarantee it's probably not nearly as many, films as they watched before they started making their first movie.
Yeah, I actually had an interesting conversation with Paul Raphael from Felix and Paul and in our SIGGRAPH Q&A about that very thing. He brought up that point, and we had some interesting back and forth about it.
Yeah, I mean, we as a generation and kind of going to our parents and to the generation after us are trained in the frame. Like, we're in frames all day, we're at screens on computers, we're looking at our phone, we have YouTube, like, we all know the frame backwards and forwards. But the idea of telling a story in our own world and knowing that, like, we actually have to build a world that's been built for us already, so we don't always consider what that means. Like, we walk outside and we know not to walk in this street, and we like have built those worlds, and they're like ingrained in us so far that we almost have to relearn world building in this way. But I do know we're kind of getting to the end of our time, and I want us to wrap up a little bit about like how, to kind of echo Erica's point and what Eve was just saying, is like utilizing the Look Club as a resource to discover work and to start to discover work that's in this similar vein to what you're trying to do. Hopefully,
yes.
To do that, we need this community to submit or share their work with us. You can do so on our site. There's a submit button on the sidebar and at the bottom of the homepage. But if you have any questions, you could just email us or Instagram us or anything, and we'll help you try and get it on our site. And we'll put it on our site, but we'll help get the information from you to get it on our site. And
I want to be super clear. It's not an approval process. I mean, it has to be immersive and interactive in some way, and that's all listed on the site. But if you've created it, it's valid. We're not passing judgment on whether or not it should or shouldn't be up there. But we say we'll help you get it up there because we're still a small team. So we're helping to make the manual additions into our database at the moment.
Yeah, we want it all. I mean, that's the thing. It's like let it all show up before we start judging it. And I think that speaks to this idea of to Emmy or not to Emmy, right? Like, ultimately, awards help us to decide what's working and not working, and see these sort of beacons of something, of storytelling to aspire to. Ultimately, that's the goal. But in these early days, when folks are still figuring it out, it's like we don't want to be too quick to just follow one path. We want to collect all this amazing work that is being done in one place, the Look.club, and then be able to look at it and study it and compare and see what's working and use that to grow and to help all of us get to that next step faster. It's so important. So yeah, like Erica said, it's like share it, and then it's a give and a take. Like, you contribute your work so that we can help more people find it, and at the same time we give you the opportunity to explore existing work and learn new tricks of the trade that are working, that you find effective for your storytelling. And I don't know if I said this earlier, Jess, but one thing that I love about our work is we both are writer-directors, and we both have done a lot of work in 360, and we have different styles. Like, we have very different styles, and I think that's so cool, and one isn't right or wrong. Right. And I watch yours and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is not a choice I would have made, and I see how she's using that, and that opens my mind to something new. And I think that's really our collective goal, kind of, right, is to kind of pass that on.
And every choice isn't right for every story. So having a tool belt of choices from each other's work and from what you're trying to tell can create your own ingredients to something spectacular. And that's why we need to share at this moment in time. I hope forever it stays that way, but definitely now. I guess.
Well, and I'm really excited with what we've been doing with the show. I mean, if I do say so myself, I think really, I mean, Eve mentioned earlier, like, we're really not. The show really isn't intended to judge or pass judgment on anything, but more than anything, I think it's just to help provide some guidance of what works, what doesn't work. right? Knowing what we know from both a narrative, our experience working in narrative stories, and also our experience on the technical side of working with immersive technologies, 360 cameras, and Unity and Unreal and whatnot. Of okay, well maybe these are places for improvement, and I think that's something that greatly benefits the community. It helps drive just the innovation of storytelling forward, and I think there's a big role to be played in terms of having a trained eye critiquing and working hand in hand also just with the Emmys in general. And I think that is what, in terms of motivating a team, I'm like, okay, why would you submit something to the Emmys? First of all, always consider yourself worthy to submit.
Yeah.
And second, to submit it with the hope that it can get that same kind of critical eye recognition of, okay, here's something that really worked, and let it be a milestone on the path of developing these immersive narrative stories.
Yeah, and honestly, you may be surprised that we still have, like, just because something wins or is nominated for an award or an Emmy doesn't mean it's perfect. And in fact, there's
especially now, I think, now when it's so early in the medium.
Yeah, and so, I would highly encourage you watch, like, Kimmy Schmidt is kind of a great one because it doesn't even need a headset, but we really worked hard to give some constructive criticism of what worked for us and what didn't.
And I love that you say that, the what worked for us, and I think that's so key, is like, to pile onto what Erica was saying, is it's when we say what works and doesn't, it's not necessarily, black or white, right or wrong, but it's when you watch something or experience something, it makes you feel a certain way. And what we're really trying to get to the heart of is why. Because once you understand how something works and why it makes you feel a certain way or doesn't, then you become empowered and you have that control to use those tools to make an audience feel a certain way, and it becomes a choice and not an accident. Jessica, please finish your thought.
It's basically that is, I think, I do think even the incredible writers on Kimmy versus the Reverend didn't 100% have every point of view of writing for something that's immersive because it's so new. And what we're hoping is that we're able to offer some of the most seasoned people in television and people who have never written a word a new perspective. And in some ways, the people who've never written a word have it a little bit easier because they don't have the habits of the frame.
I could see that. And I think we found some similarities with Traveling While Black, which was directed by an amazing acclaimed director who was relatively new to 360. And you see that in terms of, the techniques that the director is really steeped in and familiar with. And then there are some new approaches that one can use in 360. So no spoilers, but you can go check out that episode to hear more of our thoughts on that.
Yeah, and while you're online clicking around doing all of your research, stop by all of our social media accounts. We're on Instagram, Twitter, on YouTube. We've got a Facebook page, and just search everything under the Look Club.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. We hope you learned something, got inspired, and maybe we'll go watch and make some work.
And share it with the Look Club.